There's a hidden war being fought right now for your attention. And the main battleground? It's the very screen you're looking at. This is a huge conflict between governments who are desperate to control the story and the social media platforms that have basically given a megaphone to billions of people.
And that really gets to the heart of what we're talking about today. Why are governments, and I mean all kinds of governments from democracies to autocracies, so completely terrified of your social media feed? Well, the answer has a name. It's called digital sovereign anxiety.
To really get what this anxiety is all about, we have to rewind a little bit. See, for most of modern history, the state had a really firm grip on the public story. It controlled the information because, well, it controlled all the channels the information flowed through.
Just think about it, right? You had editors, journalists, TV executives. They were the gatekeepers. They all worked within a regulated system, and their job was to filter and shape the news before it ever got to you. What that did was create a pretty consistent top-down national story.
Well, that entire model has been completely shattered. Social media didn't just add a few new channels to the mix, it created a whole new information ecosystem. It's decentralized, it's chaotic, and it's an incredibly powerful battleground for ideas where pretty much anyone can have a voice.
And the shift has been honestly nothing short of dramatic. I mean, look at these estimates. Social video platforms, we're talking TikTok, YouTube, they are now the main force in how people get their news. Traditional sources are just being left in the dust. The old gatekeepers haven't just been challenged, they've been completely bypassed.
And this isn't some small niche trend we're talking about. Over half the population in the US, 54%, now gets its news mainly from these online networks. That's more than traditional TV and news websites combined. The whole center of gravity for information has just fundamentally moved.
So what's the fallout from all this chaos? This quote really nails it. We're all trying to navigate this digital world that can feel censored, distorted, and just plain unreliable. And what happens when we can't even agree on basic facts? Well, the trust that holds our institutions together starts to crumble, and that erosion of trust is a huge driver of the state's anxiety.
Now, the other huge driver of this fear is how social media has totally changed real-world action. It's not just about changing minds anymore. Now, it's about mobilizing bodies out into the streets, and that kind of power is a real double-edged sword.
Okay, let's break this down. The old school way was what we call collective action. It needed a formal structure, a hierarchy. Think of labor unions or political parties. But today's connective action is totally different. It's decentralized, it's fluid, and it uses these digital networks to bring people together, making movements faster and way more adaptable than ever before.
And this isn't just a theory. It has incredibly serious real-world consequences. In Bangladesh, online organized protests were met with internet blackouts and, tragically, deadly force. In Nepal, a movement against corruption, largely led by Gen Z and fueled by social media, led to arrests under a tough new Digital Security Act. The state's reaction is often incredibly fast and incredibly severe.
So that brings us to the next logical question. How are governments fighting back? Because they're not just reacting with force on the streets anymore. Oh no. They are building a very sophisticated digital arsenal to try and reclaim control over the online world.
And we're way beyond just blocking websites now. States are using what's called smart repression to monitor online chatter and quietly silence dissenting voices. They create strategic noise by flooding social media with junk to bury important news. And they're passing hostage-taking laws that can hold local employees of tech platforms personally liable, basically forcing companies to censor on the government's behalf.
So let's look at how this can play out, even in a democracy. The huge showdown between Brazil's Supreme Court and the platform X is a perfect, modern example of a state flexing its legal muscle to enforce its own digital sovereignty.
So, how'd they do it? It was a step-by-step squeeze. First, they used legal leverage, demanding a local representative they could actually hold accountable. Then, they brought immense financial pressure, freezing assets and hitting them with massive fines. And then, in a move no one saw coming, they started fining individual citizens for just trying to use a VPN to get around the ban.
And the court's entire argument really boils down to this quote right here. They basically said, look, freedom of expression isn't absolute, and every single company, whether it's from here or another country, has to respect our national laws. It's this incredibly powerful declaration of national authority in the digital age.
But here's the thing. This fight isn't just between giant states and giant tech platforms. It's also about all the users who are caught right in the middle. As censorship and moderation get more intense,
People are inventing entirely new ways to communicate just to survive online.
And this has led to this really fascinating thing called algospeak. It's basically a creative, always changing secret language for the internet. It's designed specifically to fly under the radar of all those automated content filters that both the platforms and governments are using.
And here are some pretty brilliant examples of it in action. People will say unalive to talk about death, or they'll use the watermelon emoji as a stand-in for the Palestinian flag to get around political censorship. It's this constant cat-and-mouse game where human creativity is always trying to stay just one step ahead of the algorithm.
So when you put all of this together, the fights over narratives, over protests, over speech, it's all pushing us toward a really critical turning point. That original dream of a single, open, borderless internet, it seems to be fading away, and it's being replaced by something very, very different.
And a huge part of that change is just how polluted the digital space has become. Get this, for the first time ever in 2024, the majority of all internet traffic wasn't even human. 51%. It was automated bots, just flooding our feeds and shaping our conversations on a scale that's hard to even wrap your head around.
And we're moving way beyond simple bots now. We're seeing the rise of what are called synthetic identities. These are fully formed AI-generated fake people, complete with profile pictures and life stories. They're used to create the illusion of grassroots movements, making it almost impossible to know what's real and what's not anymore.
In response to all this, governments are building digital walls. The EU is focused on tackling systemic risk with its big Digital Services Act. The UK has put a duty of care on platforms. And, as we saw, Brazil is using direct judicial power. No matter where you look, the trend is clear. More rules, more control.
So the real takeaway here is this. The internet is splintering. It's changing from what we thought of as a global, common space into a collection of what you could call sovereign networks. Each one has its own laws, its own digital borders, and its own rules, all enforced by the power of the nation-state. And this leaves us at a really critical moment. As we build these new digital walls to try and manage the chaos and get some control back, we have to ask ourselves a pretty vital question. Are we actually protecting ourselves, or are we just trapping ourselves inside, sacrificing the very openness that made the internet so revolutionary to begin with?